Hi, everybody. This is pretty cool.
It's so natural.
So this is the first time we're ever doing a podcast episode with a live audience, which is a really fun and exciting way to do it. We have alumni here from APN joining us, and I'm really excited to have everybody. Thank you so much for coming. First, I want to give a shout out to our podcast plant. It lives in my office sometimes, it lives in the podcast studio sometimes, and now it's up here joining us, and it just really sort of is symbolic to our Therapy Unboxed and their podcast. So I'm really glad to have that with us today. And I'm really excited to have you with me today.
I'm glad to be here.
Most of you know, but for those who don't, my name is Lana Seiler, and I am a clinician here at All Points North Lodge and the clinical manager of the trauma program. And I have a podcast called Therapy Unboxed, in which we talk about all kinds of things therapy related. My belief is that educated consumers are the best kinds of consumers. And I feel like for some reason, mental health and behavioral health has kind of had this like shroud of mystery around it, where like we do these magical things and all of a sudden people get better. And I think that's kind of crazy. I think it's better if people know more about techniques and modalities and theories, and even terms and things like that. So that's kind of what the show's been about. I've had some pretty cool guests on talking about different things. So this is a pretty exciting one because it's the holidays, and I wanted to do a podcast on relapse and relapse prevention. And one of the things that we do on the show is there's stuff that we talk about a lot, right? Like relapse, depression, like terms that we just kind of throw around and we just sort of glaze over because we all feel like we have an understanding, which we do. But I like to talk about it a little more thoroughly, a little more deeply, and kind of get into different. So today we're going to talk about, for example, relapse as it relates to substance use disorder and relapse as it relates to mental health and trauma, because as everyone knows in this room, we work, we treat primary trauma and mental health and primary substance abuse. So I thought we would have a conversation during a time that can be difficult for people. The holidays can be really wonderful, and they can also be really challenging. Family get-togethers. Dustin Straight.
Yes.
Dustin Straight is a phenomenal clinician. He is the clinical manager of the substance use program. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to hear his take on all of this. And I have some questions for you that we will get into.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
Yay. So relapse.
Yep.
I was thinking about this on the drive home yesterday, and relapse really is, so if we look at it just kind of in essence, it's like a return to or a return of something. Mm-hmm. Many things can be relapsing. There's a lot of medical conditions that are relapsing. And so also kind of just taking the like shame and stigma out of that term, I think is helpful.
Oh yeah.
Because I think in our field, we tend to think of relapse as this failure that can carry a lot of shame with it. And we're looking to destigmatize mental health as anyway. And so I think destigmatizing relapse is really important, because when at least I know in my career and also in my personal life with my friends and loved ones, sometimes people don't come back from relapses because they're too afraid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you talk about relapse, because it's one thing that I've noticed in working with clients is everyone's worried about it, but nobody wants to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And one of the funny things was, like, when I was in grad school, that's one of the first things they teach you is it's a fancy name called the trans-theoretical model of addiction and recovery, right? And relapse is in there. Literally, it's one of the stages of change for substance use disorder, people that have substance use disorder. It says optional in parentheses on it. And I thought it was kind of a joke. Like, I thought it was kind of this tongue-in-cheek comment. And the more I learned about it, I was like, no, this is actually a thing. And like in the rooms of AA, you hear people say, we don't shoot our wounded. And that's exactly what they're talking about. If someone relapses, we don't want shame or ego to be the thing that keeps you from coming back. When I've had clients relapse, I say, don't waste it. Like, I don't want you to relapse. In no way am I advocating for you to go out and pick up tonight. That's not what I'm saying. But if you find yourself in a position where you've kind of gone off the rails and you need to slip back into that dysfunctional system where you are the most functional or you're the most comfortable, learn from that. Don't waste it. The pain that comes with a relapse. I mean, I've relapsed. It was not an enjoyable experience, but I needed that. It was a necessary thing to have happen for me to really dig a little bit deeper and go, okay, why the hell did that happen? And how did I get here? Like when I kind of did like an autopsy of my sobriety, I kind of went like, oh shit. I went, this happened and then this happened and then this happened, because a relapse doesn't happen when you pick up. It happens way, way before that. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of the misconceptions about it.
Yeah. And I want to dive into that a little bit more in a minute, sort of dissect and look at what relapse, how it can show up for people and what warning signs can be. There have been many ways of looking at substance use disorder over the years. I guess right now, sort of what we're mostly looking at is the disease model of addiction. And I know that we're also, especially more recently, really incorporating this idea of addiction as a solution and use of substances and alcohol to kind of self-medicate and self-soothe. So I want to hear your perspective on that, because we can talk about relapse in both terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we hear like the term, some people don't know the disease model of addiction, right? Hopefully my people know what we're talking about, or I'm going to be disappointed. Not mad, disappointed. So disease model of addiction, right? There's biological conditions, psychological, sociological, and spiritual conditions. And those are just kind of the four categories that we use to organize the disease of addiction. And within those four categories, you could have, who knows how many variables, right? And when a lot of clients come in, they're like, well, I just want to know why I'm an alcoholic or why I'm an addict. And it's like, well, I mean, we could spend a bunch of time on that if you want to. And I think a lot of times people want to have one answer, right? It was because of this, or it was because of that. And it's like, well, I wish it were that simple.
Right.
If it were a single variant disease, we would just treat the one thing and you'd be fine. But because of the multivariant nature of it, it's like, oh shit, well, we're going to have to change several things. So we're going to have to look at, okay, genetic predisposition, right? And then psychologically, do you have a co-occurring disorder, right? So I have depression, or I have anxiety, or I have trauma, or I have something else going on at the same time that I have substance use. And then socially, if you grow up in a culture where drinking or using drugs is, no one does it, chances your exposure to it's almost nothing. Your likelihood of developing a substance use disorder, pretty low. You might develop some other maladaptive or healthy way to cope with everything that's going on in the world. And then the spiritual component, which a lot of people kind of, they brace when they hear it. And we're not talking necessarily about organized religion. We're talking about your soul, the essence of you and what makes you unique to this world. We're all carbon-based life forms. We're two unique souls, right?
We're star stuff, you and me,
right.
Dustin. We're made of stars.
Made of stars, because we're, Sorry, I can't follow that up. That's too good. But yeah, so that's kind of the disease model piece of it. And then when we look at relapse or just substance use, when we're going to call it functional, right? When we start using, we don't have the idea of like, oh, someday I'm going to be an addict and just burn my life down. And this is really how I want to take my life. We use it and we go, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is how I want to feel all the time. And when you take a step back, and again, I've talked to my guys about this, that was a feeling of safety. And that was a feeling of belonging and connection, because you kind of started out with like drinking or using with people. And over time, that turns into a different behavior, right? It's not about connecting with other people. It's about connecting with your drug of choice. It's about achieving that sense of safety because it's just available. Right. And I can turn it on right when I need to. It's reliable. It's a relationship that hasn't rejected me. It hasn't judged me. And the further down that rabbit hole we go, the more and more compulsive it becomes. And then all of a sudden we wind up in, a kind of dire strait of addiction.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. And I mean, the idea was good.
Yeah.
It's just,
it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. It's efficient.
Yeah.
It's the problem with it is in general, it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Right.
So.
And so when I'm talking to my patients, a lot of times what I'll say is I can validate and I get that there is pain potentially, or feeling of like lost or whatever it is that's sort of, like you were saying, precipitated the looking for that type of solution. And then I'll also say, and it's become its own animal. Mm-hmm. And it's its own thing now that we have to look at. We can't just brush that over and say, well, if we treat this and if we get over this pain, then you're not going to ever use again. It's not that simple.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, this is a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there differences in substance use disorder relapse versus behavioral addiction, process addiction, in terms of how that happens for people and in their brains?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question because, I mean, again, so process addiction being kind of like gambling or shopping or sex or something like that versus substance use, which obviously includes a substance. And I think the warning signs are going to be somewhat similar, mm-hmm. right? Because in either case, whether it's process or substance use, you're engaging in a compulsive behavior that is dysfunctional. And a series of dysfunctional behaviors creates a dysfunctional life. And what's so interesting about addicts, alcoholics, people with process addiction is they become very functional in the dysfunctional, mm-hmm. right? Sometimes we call it the calm and chaos. So generally when you hear about warning signs, I think one of the big misunderstandings is that a relapse is if you engage in that behavior. So if an alcoholic relapses, it's because they drank, mm-hmm. or if someone who has a gambling addiction, if they go to the casino, that was the relapse. And it's like, no, actually it happened way before that when they started engaging in other compulsive behaviors, mm-hmm. and they can even be healthy ones.
Right.
So one of the really popular ones, and when people kind of start to they get sober and they start to get their body back, they're in the gym, right?
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic place to be. In fact, that's a really good coping skill. But when we take it to a compulsive place, when I have to go to the gym every single day, and now all of a sudden I have to go to the gym twice a day, and starting to kind of forfeit some relationships or overlook some other things. Or during the holidays, one of the things that, when you, at least this is my experience. So I was fortunate enough to be unemployed for a lot of my addiction. And when I got a job and I had money, I wanted to show my family like, hey, look at me. I can buy you gifts.
Yeah.
And I bought way too many gifts. And I created some financial stress for myself.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how sneaky our disease can be, where it's not going to show up, because you drank, because you walked by a liquor store, because you went to a Christmas party. It's going to be because you were putting yourself back into this kind of dysfunctional, functional state, mm-hmm. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, the warning signs are kind of clever. Mm-hmm. Like you don't pick up on them. It's not just not going to AA meetings. It's like, okay, that you should do that. That's good for your recovery. If you have a daily program of recovery that you work, you should absolutely do that. If that starts to trail off, okay, that's obviously a warning sign. But it can also be cross-addictive, right? Where I turn it into something else. It's shopping. It's putting myself back into that familiar kind of chaotic place.
Yeah.
So those are, and again, I wish there was like a straight checkbox list of like, oh, if you don't go to a meeting 4 days in a row, or if you are mean to your mom or whatever, yeah. It's like, okay, those are the warning signs. But this is, and again, I've talked to my guys about this a lot. Recovery is more about self-mastery and understanding yourself so well that when those things happen, you go, oh, that's what's going on with me right now. Like I can check in and I can say, oof, I need to keep an eye on this. And that's really what this process is. So.
You and I share clients.
Hmm?
And I love that because your clients come into my office and they quote you all the time.
That's awesome.
And it's always this like really profound, like stoic philosophy.
Thanks, guys.
Like, that sounds like Dustin.
Good looking out.
I was putting something together and I was finding some quotes from like Stoicism and early philosophers. And I was like, I feel like Dustin right now.
Nice.
Let's talk about craving.
Cool.
So you said there's more to the buildup of a relapse than just like walking by a liquor store. But what about just walking by a liquor store or having a party that you're at where people are drinking?
Mm-hmm. So if we cut back to the disease model of addiction, that there's some biological stuff going on. So my brain is going to remember things that were good. And it's going to remember environments where those good things happened. So let's say I have a liquor store that I used to go to by my house and I walk by there in early recovery. I don't have a lot of distance between me and my last use. I might notice something. Mm-hmm. My nervous system might say, hey, remember that? You might get this I call it a kind of a squirrely feeling. That's actually normal. And it's really helpful to know that that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's not that you're weak or that, there's something wrong with you. It's actually what your brain does. You associate something really beneficial with that environment. So, we call it, technical term, environmental risk factor, right? So does that mean you can never walk down that street again? No, not at all. Should you walk down that street the first day out of treatment? Probably not.
Right.
Because, and we were talking about this earlier today in a group, respecting your disease, right? So if anyone's ever played sports and you had an adversary a team you were playing against that was capable of beating your team, you weren't afraid of them. You didn't walk around in fear of them, but you certainly respected their ability to win the game. If we treat addiction, mental health in the same way, you know what? I have this condition that if I don't respect it, it can bring me to my knees. Yeah. But it's also something that if I continue to learn about myself, if I continue to practice these skills that I've learned and integrate them, then there comes a time when you can walk by that liquor store and you're fine. The craving doesn't happen. Yeah. But I've also heard people talk about kind of being embarrassed or ashamed of cravings. And it's like, well, that's what your brain's been doing. Right. Of course you have cravings. It'd be weird if you didn't. Yeah. We can reduce the mystery and stigma and weirdness around that for sure. Yeah. The fastest way to kind of resolve a craving is tell somebody about it. Right. I still do that. Mm-hmm. Do I have cravings still? Yeah. Are they 4 days long and wildly intense? No. They're about 4 seconds long and they're not super intense because I've been practicing this thing for a really long time. We're never going to be rid of it because we're never cured. But what we can do is we can make them, cravings, make all these things really, really small and really manageable. Yeah, that's a good segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about relapse in the context of mental health and trauma also. And when I was getting trained in, I can't remember actually which training it was, but one of them. Nice. They were talking about how can you determine when trauma therapy is working, when someone's getting better. And one of the things that they said was if the trauma responses are shorter, less intense, and less often. Right. And so it's really, we're looking at the same thing. When I'm talking to my patients, a lot of times what I'll say is, we're talking about, what does it look like when you're ready to leave? And what does it look like to be in, remission or recovery from having PTSD or something like that? And one of the things that I bring up is I want people to be able to have choice. And I think in both substance use disorder and in different mental health issues, including trauma, we tend to be afraid, like you're talking about, of the liquor store on the corner or of the school that we have to walk by or going to a family event because we're afraid we're going to get triggered. And in early recovery, of course, my advice is maybe don't walk down that street or maybe take some space from your family. But the last thing I want is to have people feel like they can't. I also hope that people have
the ability to say no if they need to, right? So if I know that going to a family gathering or going to my high school reunion is going to be very triggering for me, for whether it's substance use or PTSD or whatever, the smart thing may be for me to be able to set a boundary and say no.
Yeah.
And that's also a really important thing to learn in recovery and looking at relapse prevention. And also, if we want to be able to go, I want people to be able to go.
Right.
And be able to, have good internal boundaries and, have coping skills so that if you start to feel activated, you can, breathe.
Yeah. I mean, the one kind of the super fun thing about working in addiction treatment is addicts, alcoholics were notoriously clever. Even when I was dead broke, I still somehow was able to procure alcohol, right? Problem solving. And we can take that same skill set and apply it to recovery, right? So I've got this family function that I'm supposed to go to, and I kind of should be there and I want to go, but I'm really, really nervous about it. How do I solve that riddle? It's like, oh, okay, well, I could have a friend come with me.
Yeah.
I could set a window of 2 hours.
Right.
I could make sure that I'm there early, not late, because the later I'm there, the more drunk Uncle Frank gets, and that just makes me angry. So, I mean, again, we can start to solve these problems when we have the presence of mind and the sobriety to utilize, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of fun when we can kung fu that stuff and turn it into something that's going to benefit our recovery. So
yeah, absolutely.
Just utilizing some of those little things that we can do.
And also similarities in terms of relapse prevention from mental health issues and substance use disorder is these preparatory things we can do and that we incorporate in our lives. So we talked a lot about for substance use, things like going to meetings and making sure that you're, staying healthy in your body, not overly crazy at the gym, but not nuts, but right. Just making sure that we address the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, things like that. And it's very similar for mental health and trauma too. We're looking at what can we do in our lives. I look at it like there's reactive and proactive, right? We're doing things proactively, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, to kind of keep ourselves in good fitness in our recovery. And then there are things that we need that are like, I got to call in the big guns, like I'm in trouble. I'm really activated. I'm worried. And then I have these strategies, these 5 people I can call, this place I can go, these, breathing exercises I can do to kind of bring myself back down. And so there's so much of the scaffolding, the structure of it that's the same. And I think that like a really important part is the plan.
Oh yeah.
Like having a plan because, and I'm going to say a bad word.
Cool.
Finally. I get this from the rooms, but they say like, you don't want to be like trying to figure it out when your ass is on fire.
Yeah.
Right. Like you want to be trying to figure it out beforehand when you're calm.
Yeah. It's like this idea of, when did Noah build the ark? Before
the flood.
There you go. Right.
We didn't even plan that.
No, we didn't. And she just killed that. That was amazing. Nicely done. But no, I mean, that's really the idea here, right? I'm not going to wait until my ass is on fire until there's a flood. I need to have a proactive plan if all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And what is that going to look like? 9 times out of 10, it should include somebody else. And whether I think that's true for trauma, just like it is for mental health or substance use disorder, I can't do this thing alone. Like, I mean, I've told a lot of my clients, it's not necessarily the drug or that alcohol that's going to kill you. It's going to be your ego. It's the inability to reach out. It's the idea that, no, I've got this. So like if I need to, break glass in case of emergency, that's usually going to be someone I feel safe with. And it's going to be someone that I've kind of curated and taken care of and fostered a relationship with. Now, whether that's a sponsor, a family member, a spouse, a brother, a sister, or whatever, doesn't matter. But just somebody where you can just reach out and say, hey, listen, things are going sideways. I need some help. And the other thing that's worth noting or thinking about is when someone asks you for help, are you insulted or frustrated? No. Generally, you're complimented because that's the other person saying, I trust you. I will be vulnerable with you. I will be honest with you. Every time someone asks me for help, I end up feeling honored. I'm like, oh my God, like, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we lose sight of that, especially when we kind of get into that deep hole of like, oh shit.
Yeah, right.
So,
It can feel like we're imposing on another person, or we're a burden to them.
That's the big one.
Mm-hmm. And when we're in that place of need, it's easy to feel that way, because I think I may be going out on a limb, but I doubt it. I think most of us feel probably a little ashamed when we're in need, when we're struggling. And so it's hard to, when we're doing work, especially in group, a lot of times when people are working on something that's really shaming, I'll have them stop and make eye contact with people in the room, because it's hard to reach. Even just eye contact is reaching out. Yeah. And that's really hard to do. So that's a great way to think about it. Like, I'm actually complimenting this person by asking them. That might be something to write down, and that's another thing. Well, I wanted to say one other thing first. With the reaching out, in my experience, I'll often recommend people have like 5 people, like 5 names.
Definitely.
Because the worst thing is if you like really need and you only have this one person, and of course they would want to help, but if they're just unavailable, you don't want to be caught in that sort of like, oh my God, well now there's nobody and there's nothing I can do.
Right.
So I do want to talk a little bit more about like what, and this doesn't have to be like a full formal, but what does a relapse prevention plan look like? Like, what are some components of it? Yeah.
So, basic components would just be accountability, right? Regular communication, self-care. Like people have heard HALT. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, just keep an eye out for stuff like that.
Yeah.
For me, it's more about building the life that you want as a protective factor. So if I have a life that I enjoy, that I've ritualized certain things into it, right? So if I've ritualized self-care, so maybe that's meditation, maybe it's running, maybe it's going to a meeting, maybe it's whatever works for you, like whatever life you promised yourself when you were a little kid, like if you can start bringing that to fruition. But then the key here is the ritualization of it. So when we look at people with substance use disorder, there's a lot of ritual that goes into using. Alcoholics, generally, they'll drink at the same time or the same place. They'll sit at the same bar stool.
Yeah.
IV heroin users, they will literally use the same spoon. They will inject in the same spot until they can't anymore.
Yeah.
What was so interesting about that was like, oh shit, these are rituals that people don't even know they're in. And we call it an addiction cycle, but each element of that cycle of addiction has a meaning, and it's a method of a person trying to achieve that sense of safety. So if I can take that same concept and I can start to like kind of execute this life I promised myself when I was a 5-year-old, or whatever, when you thought you were going to have this amazing life that you were interested in and that you wanted to protect and you wanted to grow, if I can ritualize that. So I'm going to wake up every day at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever, and I'm going to go meditate for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to work at a job that I'm actually passionate about.
Yeah.
Versus the job that I'm good at. Like, there's a difference, right? Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you should do it. It's if you care about it. If you're going to a job every day that you hate, chances are sobriety is going to be difficult.
Marsha Lanahan says it can be both.
There you go.
Shout out DBT.
No, I think it can be, but I think you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Over the long term, what's the exposure? What's the risk? And so ritualizing sobriety so that you have what we call protective factors, right? That's what we want to integrate into our lives, so that, let's say we need to, pick up the phone and we're supposed to call 5 people. Well, I was going to see those 5 people over the course of my day anyway, because of how I've structured my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the easiest way to do it. And I think that sometimes it can be scary to invest that much in change and invest that much in your recovery. But when you make that decision, and that's really what it is, it's like, okay, this is going to be my top priority because everything else flows from that. You don't have to apologize for making those decisions.
Yeah.
you kind of get nervous. You're like, oh shit, like I don't want to go to that party. And it's like, well, that party is a threat and it's not in service of your recovery. So you get to say no.
Right. You get to have that boundary.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't have to feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can just say it's not, that's, I always used to tell myself, if there's any doubt, there is no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
In early recovery. Like if there was any doubt that this was going to be a problem, there was no doubt I needed to stay away.
Yeah. Well, choice is agency, right? And that's something that's really important for us. Recovering from trauma, mental health issues, and substance use disorder is like having choice and agency return to us because addiction takes it away.
Oh yeah.
And so does trauma.
100%.
Yeah. So for people who are in early recovery, let's say like just leaving treatment, what are some things that we can do? So I'm a fan of the written out relapse prevention plan in the beginning, just because I think it is nice to have something you can call on. We talked about a few elements of it. So having some people you can call, and what I was hearing you say, which I think might be a nice addition, is writing out, again, Marsha Linehan, I like DBT, but when I talk about stuff, I sound like I'm like a big DBT person.
It's functional.
It is very functional. It's like the how-to.
Right.
She says, hey, you have to have a life worth living. And so it might be nice to put in writing in the relapse prevention plan, some of these reasons for being sober, reasons why we want to stay sober, and, so you can go back and read it.
One of the things I do with clients when we're kind of developing that aftercare plan, relapse prevention plan is the miracle question, right? So if you woke up tomorrow morning and all of your problems were solved, what would your life look like? And I say, just go for broke. Like write down this amazing, incredible life, all of your problems gone. And then you bring it back into the present and it's like, okay, cool. How do we get there? And if it's, I want to pursue a higher education, I want to go into doing this, or I want to move to the Bahamas and rent jet skis for the rest of my life. It's like, cool, man, go do that. Like, how do we get there? So identifying a life worth staying sober for, that can be kind of scary for people. But from a very functional perspective, I've even used SMART goals, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have, here's the next 6 months, we're going to achieve these 5 things. How are we going to do it? Okay, cool. Let's get that back down into something even more manageable, a daily schedule. What's that going to look like? Okay, I'm going to wake up every day at this time. I'm going to go do this. And basically there's a couple ways to do it. You can have an inventory of like, okay, what sort of resentments came up during the day? I mean, you can make this thing super detailed. There's pros and cons there. I think generally what I like to do is say, all right, we're going to hit these 10 things in a day, or we have 10 things, we're going to hit 8 of them in a day, or we're going to hit 7 of them in a day. And that's how you know you're still in your lane. Yeah. And if you're down to 2 a day, it's like, oh shit, maybe we need to kind of look at that and course correct somehow. Yeah. Why are we down to 2 and why are we not at 7 or 8? Right. So
I recently started trying to get back into shape, and we have a great trainer here, Michael Benedict.
Yeah. And I don't talk to him, he scares me.
And I'm like, we need to keep this very simple. Maybe like 5 things. Yeah. Because if it's more than that, I'm going to be immediately overwhelmed and not do any of it.
Yeah, he's a crazy person. I'm not going near that guy.
That's a similar thing, right? Like if we have too many things on the list, it can feel very overwhelming.
Right. I mean, I had a client who needed a relapse actually. So was here for a short time, came back after a short time away. And if he hears this, he'll know exactly that I'm talking about him, but I'm not going to use his name. And he had the most detailed aftercare plan I've ever seen. Right. It was in like 15-minute increments for 14 hours a day. And it was it was like at one point he's like, I'm going to walk on water for 15 minutes and then I'm going to go do this. And it was just like, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Not sustainable. Right. It was a fantastic, very ambitious, bold plan. But it wasn't functional. Yeah. Now I think his schedule's a lot softer. His expectations aren't lower, they're more realistic. Yeah. Where he can actually enjoy his day. Yeah. Rather than like win at his day or like beat his day. It's like, good God, that's not why we're sober. That's not why we're doing this thing, man. Right. Can I just also give a shout out to
patients that we have had over the years we've been open that have come back to us. It's happened, you know, that's one of the things I love so much about APN and the family and the community that we've built here is there have been a lot of people who have returned, and it's never, well, I can't say never. I'm sure sometimes there's some, you know, shame and hesitation, but most of the time it's like, okay, here's what happened. Let's get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Let's try this again. And sometimes we've had people come back just because they felt close to relapse.
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed with our community.
Yeah. No, I've worked in other facilities and I haven't seen that anywhere else.
Me either.
And I don't even know why.
Right.
I people feel safe here and there's all the clinical answers, but it's like, what made this place different, or what made, I'm not sure what it is other than the people that come here.
I have to say, I love to take credit for things, and I know you do too.
Totally.
But I don't think we can take credit for
Not
this.
on this one, no.
I think it's really the community that's made it so special.
I would agree.
And people come back, and it warms my heart. So thanks guys for doing that.
Definitely.
Lapse versus relapse. Is that a thing?
I don't know. I don't know. You know, so my grand sponsor from back in the day, Frank, would like clip me in the back of the head if I said, yeah, it's a thing. He would say, you know, if you pick up, it's a relapse. I don't know. You can call it whatever you want.
Okay.
Frankly, is where I'm at. That one I don't want to weigh in on, just because it's like, I don't want to create another barrier for somebody. If you want to call it a lapse, okay. Do you want to keep lapsing? No. You can call it a relapse. Do you want to keep relapsing? No.
Right.
It's something you don't really want to do anymore, so you can call it whatever the hell you want. Okay. But that's just me. I mean, like, there's other addiction counselors that would probably freak out and be like, oh, a lapse and a lapse or a relapse are way different because one's only 24 hours or 48 hours. And that's how a relapse starts. So,
we can piss people off on this show.
No, I mean, I'm all about that. You know that.
We're good.
No. So is there a difference? Yes, technically there's a difference. A lapse is, you know, a slip, which is just another way of minimizing a relapse beginning. And I think that's language is important, right? Because that's how we interpret our world and communicate to other people what our reality is. And so if I'm minimizing, oh, I just had 17 lapses. It's like, we just drank for half a month. Like that's a fucking relapse, dude. Like that's bad. Like that's not small. Yeah. Versus, I had a relapse. I'm in the midst of it and this sucks. I need help. Like I'd rather have somebody feel the full impact of something like that, because it might save their life. Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of more old school in that one, but
you're allowed to be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm old now, so it's cool.
We can do that.
Thanks, Andy. Andy's like shaking his head like, what are you, like 6 days younger? So yeah. Wow.
So when you were talking, it made me think that might be the shame component too. Right. So if I'm too ashamed, or it's too hard, or I'm too fearful of saying I've relapsed, it might be easier to say, oh, this was a lapse.
Yeah, it could be. But again, addicts, alcoholics, we're so good at self-deception. Yeah. That's the piece that makes me so nervous.
Yeah, no, I hear.
Where it's just like, oh, it's just a lapse. It's like, oh, dude, but you really need to respect that disease. Like, I'd rather have you err on the side of, I don't want you to dwell in shame, but if it takes a little shame gut punch for you to say, oh shit, I need to go change this, then I'd rather live with a little bit of shame. We can fix that. It's an overdose, or it's, you know, driving your car off a bridge that we can't fix.
Yeah. I have the pretty unpopular opinion that not all shame is bad.
I kind of think that there's a certain amount that, I mean, there's a functionality to it where I think you and I agree that it can become kind of the soul eating emotion. But at the same time, everything has its purpose.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I show up like a real jerk, and when I do that, I need to feel a little bit of shame.
I've never done that.
So I don't show up that way anymore.
My clients are all like, he's an asshole. I just whispered that so no one out in the audience heard it. But
we may or may not have said that before you walked in the door.
You probably did. It's okay.
let's talk about the holidays. So we've mentioned a couple things like parties and family. Are there any other aspects of this time of year that can be especially challenging in recovery?
I think it's wanting to belong, and wanting to, for some people, go back to the life they had exactly as it was. So going back to that same party or with that same group of friends, and that whole party or that whole ritual was about substance use.
Yeah.
And kind of creating this story in our head that because we don't drink, we can't be a part of. And I don't think that that's true. I think we're very much still a part of a family system, a group of friends or whatever. But I think it is challenging. And I think that there, for each individual, it comes up like, what do I put first here? Do I put my friends and do I try to go on this sobriety tour and show everyone how sober I am and that I can just do all the things that I used to do? Or do I respect my disease and I stay for an hour?
Yeah.
Or I just say, you know what, I can't make it this year. I'll see you next year or whatever, because, and again, even that's risky. So there's no real silver bullet answer for anybody. But I think the thing that we bump into is feeling apart from. And I think that that's something that I was thinking about this the other day. When we recover, and this is like, I'll always be an advocate for AA. I'm a member. They do great stuff. The only issue I have with AA is the anonymous piece, because you don't hear about how many people recover and how many of us are out there. So it's very easy to feel isolated. It's very easy to feel like you're apart from or you're not connected. And I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but it's like, when we don't recover out loud, others die quietly.
Oh, yeah.
Or something to that effect. I never remember that one. And I've been thinking about that lately. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was because I was trying to think about clever things to say for this podcast. But that's tricky, especially around this time when we talk so much about, and there's so much ritual around drinking. I mean, every alcohol and beer commercial is like, you're going to have the merriest Christmas ever. You're going to have the best holiday ever if you just get hammered.
Yeah, there's like beer bottles with little Santa hats on them.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, cool. That's one more thing I can't do. And I think we start to build this story around our reality and say like, I'm a part of, or I'm not a part of, I'm separate from. And I think that's that for me is something to keep an eye on. And again, if we're pursuing that life we're staying sober for, if we have those people we can talk to, you know, a problem shared is a problem cut in half. Yeah. If I just talk about it, now all of a sudden I'm connected to somebody and I'm creating connection that way. So I think that that's something that's worth keeping an eye on for sure during the holidays. Yeah.
I love what you said about ritual, and I know we're going to wrap up here. But one
that was DBT.
Yeah. My clients call me on it all the time. One of the things I was thinking too, as I was sort of thinking about this show that we're doing right now, is reclaiming the holidays. I was thinking a lot about like, how do we survive? How do we survive get-togethers? How do we survive, stay sober through these different things? And I thought to myself, wait a minute, like, why are we just trying to survive?
Right.
How do we thrive? How do we reclaim this time of year? And whatever holidays we celebrate, or if we don't celebrate any, it's even just the like seasonal change. Like it's snowy, except for when you're living in Florida. But there's all this stuff around this time of year, this season. And so, what are some ways that people can in their recovery, like thrive and reclaim?
I mean, again, it goes back to kind of what we talked about before. If I'm constantly building, especially in early recovery, if I'm being deliberate in the life I'm building for myself, that inherently will create daily rituals. But I think we can create our own seasonal rituals.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Like, I mean, the first one that came to my mind, I remember when I got sober, I heard about like the turkey trot. Yeah. And for me, Thanksgiving was always about getting completely drunk, eating tons of food, and watching football. And it was like, oh, there's people that do healthy things on that day. Like,
it's crazy to me, but yeah.
That's a wild idea. So doing things like that, I know I've got some friends, like they'll go skinning up to the top of Vail on New Year's and ski down.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of life that they really enjoy. They really like skiing. And it's like, why can't you create those things?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be skiing down a mountain or, doing different things like that. But this is that problem solving, and this is that being deliberate and being creative.
Yeah.
Really, truly building a life that's worth staying sober for.
Yeah.
So, start your own rituals, start your own, whatever you want. And that doesn't mean you have to abandon old stuff, but you can also, like you were talking about, you can set those boundaries for yourself internally or for other people. Hey, I can't wait to come to this family get together, but can you guys wait till, 6:30 at night to get hammered?
Give me an hour.
That's how it was in my family. Yeah, give me 20 minutes and then I'll take off.
Yeah. In another life, I was a yoga teacher.
I knew that.
Way back in the day. And I remember one year, on New Year's morning, I got up really early and I went to the beach and videoed myself, of course, because I'm totally vain.
Well, that's what you have to do if you're a yoga teacher. Everyone knows that.
And did this like really great yoga practice on the beach that felt amazing at sunrise.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is so much better than being hungover on the first day of the new year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like appreciating and honoring, whether it's honoring your family, honoring yourself, honoring your sobriety. There's things that we can do. It's very easy to take things for granted, especially in recovery, right?
Yeah.
In early recovery, it's about like getting a life back. And it's like, well, then your gratitude just went out the window. Like really like setting aside some time, whether it's the holidays or monthly or weekly, to just have a ritual and have some time to just say, yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is the life I want to build, and this is why I'm doing it. It's to honor myself, my recovery, my family, or so on.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fun.
I'm going to take a sip of this delicious water.
It is the best water. I'm not even being paid to say that. If you haven't had Liquid Death.
Tastes like silk.
Liquid Death Fever.
This was really, really fun.
Mm-hmm.
We should do it again.
Let me know when and where. I'll be there.
Same microphone, same plant, different location.
Perfect.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Now we have Q&A.
This was so nice.
I have no idea what I said.
Me either.
Okay, cool.
I'm glad you reminded me of Q&A because I was about to get up and leave.
Yeah, no, we should totally stick around. I know the only reason I know is because I could see Andy.
Hi, Lana. Hey, Dustin. It's good to see you guys again. I think my question is about when you discharge. I remember discharging in April, and I was so hopeful, and I had all of these grand plans, and life got in the way, and it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and it went really shitty. And before I knew it, I had all kinds of problems that I'm trying to deal with, and it just felt overwhelming. And I didn't go to use because I want to see my kids, and it was required that I do drug tests. So, my kids are the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I know that Erin would say, well, you got to be sober for yourself, but like my kids are the most important thing in my life.
Shout out Erin.
So,
yeah, she would say that.
So I guess my question is, what do you do when you realize that you are overwhelmed and you need help?
That's a good question because sometimes life really shows up difficultly.
Yeah, it reminds me of my favorite quote from the philosopher Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? What do you do? Well, what did you do would be my question, because you're here and you're sober.
Well, I reached out to friends that I had met here.
There you go.
And that was really helpful. I had one in particular who and he and I have become really good friends. He came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks, and that was really helpful. But being here for the last couple of days has made me want to come back and just check in and do a tune-up. But I also know that it's like you still have these problems when you leave. You come here and you can like hang them on a coat rack and deal with and work on yourself. But then when you leave, you got to take the problem off the coat rack and deal with them again. And I don't want it to feel like you're avoiding something, Yeah.
One of the things I tell people a lot is like the problems are going to be there, right? And you showing up in a healthier space helps you be in the best position you can to deal with the problems. So like the problems are going to be there, right? All my problems are still around and coming daily.
Sure.
And so I'm either showing up to them in a position where I'm like not feeling empowered, not feeling grounded, not feeling really capable, or I'm showing up to them from a place of feeling grounded and capable and having a clear head. People keep telling me that I'm not stuttering and like having like a word finding problems, but I really have been lately.
I didn't say it.
No, I know. I'm noticing it.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think about that.
What's interesting for me, and again, I'm going to go back to the Stoics here, is the obstacle is the way, right? What impedes the way becomes the way. So when you left, life shows up, punches you in the face, and what do? You reached out for help.
Yeah.
You reached out and said, hey, I need help. You didn't kind of continue that ego, and you created a sense of safety and connection with someone that was so strong that they left whatever it was they were doing, came, supported you, and here you are still sober.
Yeah, this place changed my life. It really did. And I've told people that I've met here recently that, I couldn't be present for my children if it wasn't for coming here.
And that was you taking a risk.
Yeah, I was scared to come. It was frightening, but then I got here and I didn't want to leave because I felt like at that point I was avoiding the things that I needed to handle,
And were you doing that? I have no idea. But what I do know is you stayed an appropriate amount of time so that when you left, you were able to take a punch and not pick up.
Yeah.
And that's that process. We want it to be elegant and beautiful and easy and seamless. And a lot of times it's a street fight. It's a dog fight. And that's a thing that happens. And now you know that about yourself. So the next time that happens, guess what? You're more prepared, and you may actually achieve and maintain sobriety in a more elegant way. And it might be a street fight. We don't know, but you're prepared for both.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good on you, man.
How can I build a life that is worth staying sober, and how to get my dreams fulfilled?
Well, first thing that popped into my mind is that like don't have like 700 things on that list and your day like incremented out in 15-minute increments. Like I think one of the things to start with is small and not overwhelming yourself.
I generally tell my guys, what's your target? Right? So if my goal is, I'm only going to be happy if I make $36 million a year and I have 7 houses, all these different things. It's like, okay, that's probably not a good target to have. Let's start with a target of like, do you want to have peace? Like, or is your goal to just be nonstop happy? Because that's kind of a ridiculous goal. I don't know that that's a good target to have either.
Yeah.
So what's our target? Okay, so I want to have security. I want to have a sense of peace. Maybe I want a family. It's like, okay, cool. Like that's something we can work with. So let's have a target and let's look at the elements that go into that. So how do I have peace? Okay, well, I'm going to have a job. All right, cool. What job's going to be something that you're interested in and passionate about on a daily basis? Do you have that job? No, I don't. Okay, cool. What job is that? I don't know what that is for. Everyone's different. Everyone has different interests. Like I have a friend that's a lawyer. My God, no. They love it.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. So, I think it's really about being honest and checking in with, okay, what do I want for real? What am I trying to get out of this life? Is it adventure? Is it peace? Is it safety? What is it? I think that when you can answer those fundamental questions, that's when you can really start to craft something specifically and deliberately.
And some of it's an inside job because we can have all those things and still be miserable.
Absolutely.
So some of it's that like meditating and.
Sorry, I thought I had an in for the second question.
Go.
No.
I'm done. That's
your world.
meditating. That's all I have to say. Meditate.
Yeah. Mindfulness.
Lana, my bad.
It's
Lana.
it's just
I'll take a
mindfulness.
lap. The second question was, what was the best relapse prevention plan for process addiction?
I mean, as far as relapse prevention, I think for me, I say the plans are the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
They're both compulsive behaviors. I'm not intoxicated before I engage in substance use. So all that compulsive cross-addictive behavior that's coming up prior to a substance use disorder relapse or a process addiction relapse, they're going to be very similar. So it's going to be, I'm taking on more than I should. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm stressing out. I'm engaging in compulsive behaviors in other areas. I'm creating dysfunction somehow, even if it seems functional, right? I'm taking on too many projects at work. I'm working out too much. I'm shopping way too much and creating a significant amount of financial stress for myself and a sense of insecurity. Similar to that insecurity I feel when I'm engaged in my process addiction. Does that kind of make sense?
And some of the like strategies are the same and similar, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like having support. Oh, and I wanted to mention other support groups. Support is huge. You mentioned AA a couple times. There's like ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, which really is, shout out to ACOA, really like it's adult children of dysfunctional families. And there's CODA, which like any program, there are some meetings that are like tough and some meetings that are amazing. And, you know, you just got to find the right group. CODA, I went to CODA for a long time. It's a great program. Al-Anon's a great program. We can find support all over the place. And SASLAA. So I think that the elements, the scaffolding is the same.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what you're putting in those places.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, for process addiction, I mean, so like SA, Sex Anonymous, Sex and Love Addiction Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. I mean, they're all out there. And I think the other thing that's worth noting is, and I'm glad you brought this up, we can carve ourselves out of what is normal when we don't actually talk about what's going on for us. We can say, I'm the only one in the world that has this problem. And chances are there are thousands, if not millions of people that are going through the exact same experience. And this is why when I was talking about when we don't recover out loud, other people die quietly because they don't know we're there. So I guarantee, quick Google search, you'll find the support out there. And if you spend 10 minutes, you'll find exactly where you need to go.
All right, next question. I think it's trying to be a funny question, but it says, Dustin, if you could be remembered for one thing, comma, great grammar there, what would it be? Obviously, I think you know who asked that by the reaction, maybe. I don't know.
If I could be remembered for one thing,
You already did it.
other than being ruggedly handsome but approachable, it would be...
Everyone that works here disagrees at this point in time.
Wow. Thanks. When do you go back to Florida? No, this is going to sound a little cheesy maybe, I don't know. If I could be remembered for one thing, it would be showing people that it's okay to build a life you want and not apologize. To unapologetically pursue something you're passionate about, because that's scary as shit. And I didn't come up with this idea. I learned it from somebody else. So that would be cool to be remembered for that.
It's a good answer.
I know. It was.
My question, you guys talk about being proactive and reactive, and I think like both are important depending on circumstance, whatever, you know. But I guess specifically to being proactive, and you talk about, which I fully agree with, like I think once something happens, like it's easy to diagnose something after the fact, but it's already happened at that point, right? So what are some of the, and I'm sure mindfulness is a big piece of it, what are some of the ways that you would suggest kind of trying to stay ahead of the wave and being able to see like that 2 weeks before a relapse happens? Like how do you know, like the best techniques for realizing where you're at that point instead of waiting till your ass is on fire, as you say?
I love that we're all using that.
Yeah. My ass was on fire. I mean, you're going to hate my answer. Journaling is the most effective way.
It's such a therapist-y thing to say.
Yeah, because people hate that answer
Yeah.
because they have to sit down and write things. That is a really, really, really effective way to keep an eye on what's going on. The reason being, and I didn't want to do this, and I did it for a long time in early recovery, and as my guys know, I'm not going to tell you to do anything I haven't done. And my therapist was like, write 3 pages every day. And I was like, shit, I don't want to do that. And she's like, well, that's exactly why you should be doing that. So the first page is like superficial crap. Like I had a turkey sandwich today and it was delicious. I was like, no one cares. And by the second page, it's like, yeah, but I ate alone and I think it's because everyone hates me. Mm-hmm. And then by the third page, it's like, no, I hate myself. And it's like, oh, okay. Like you actually like dug deeper. And it's like, shit, this thing works. And the longer you can do that, the more you're slowing down your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions. So you're getting in touch with those. So you're regulating better. 2, you're actually chronicling what's going on for you. And your ability to check in becomes so much more efficient. That is the best way I know how to get ahead of that. Like I think you were asking, like, how do I kind of not see into the future, but like, how do I really head this thing off before it starts? Is that
like not have to look back into the past, really, like basically look into the present more effectively.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that the journaling is a way to do that. I think that having that daily ritual of recovery is doing that. But I think also not fearing something like that happening, because then I can't live 100% in authenticity. You know, I'm going 80%. It's like, well, that might be a problem.
Another one is the community piece.
Yeah.
Like telling our friends, like, let me know, you know, sometimes I can't see what's going on for me. And like a journaling exercise like that is great because it helps us recalibrate our own understanding of ourselves over time. But even after that, like sometimes I need my friends to check in, you know, be like, hey, Lana, I'm worried about you because of, you know, this or that, or you're isolating, or you know, so that, you know, having other eyes is helpful too.
Yeah. I haven't seen you for 6 days. What's going on with you?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thanks.
Last question. Dustin, can you answer the miracle question?
Can I answer the miracle question?
This is fun.
If I woke up tomorrow and all my problems were solved, my documentation would be up to date.
Oh, my blood pressure just went through the roof.
Right? And that would be about it. I'm wildly fortunate to be living a life that I could not have possibly imagined. With a person that I didn't know existed and with a kiddo on the way. So I wouldn't change anything other than that documentation issue. So I'm good.
All right, yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching or listening to our first ever Therapy Unboxed episode recorded in front of a live audience. It was really exciting and I had a really great time with my friend and colleague, Dustin Straight. If you liked what you heard, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. If you want to check out other episodes, feel free to go to apn.com/podcasts. And if you want to contact us for anything, feel free to email pod@apn.com. Thanks again. Happy holidays.